Doris, your darling bus, episode number 4. G'day folks, and welcome to Doris, you darling bus, a fortnightly podcast about that unsung hero of the music industry, the two of us. I'm your host, my name is Jonno, and today's guest is a blues and roots musician from Melbourne who spent his teens and early 20s touring relentlessly across Australia and Europe in everything from a Bedford van to a bicycle, and certainly learnt a lot along the way. I'm talking about Mr. Rob Sawyer, and he joins me on the phone to tell us all about it. So, Rob, where I want to start is my first impression of Rob Sawyer. I was standing on Liebig Street in Warrnambool, and we had a gig together with Luke Watt and Tom Richardson. We were all coming to Warrnambool for a mutual friend's birthday, and we decided we'd have a gig the night before with the four of us. And I was standing out the front of the Loft in Warrnambool, one of Australia's finest music venues, and there's this huge roar, and then down the street comes this massive mustard-coloured Land Cruiser and pulls up in front of the Loft, and out pops Rob Sawyer. Now, I'd seen you play a few times, but I'd never met you, and the truck certainly announced your presence. And that's what I wanted to ask you about first. You did a fair bit of touring in your Land Cruiser. What drew you to the Land Cruiser?
Well, I actually didn't do a shitload of touring in that car.
Right.
I kind of got it on the tail end of sort of touring and traveling and playing and whatnot. I wanted one for years, but it was sort of my old man was always like, "No, you're not having one of those bloody things. That anything with 4-wheel drive will cost you double, and it'll just break down." But I'm pretty sure most sons resist what their parents or their old man says, especially, and him saying that made me want it even more.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was cruising home from Portland one day, back towards the Mornington Peninsula, and I actually saw that thing on the side of the road in Terang.
Right.
And I don't know. I guess they're just a good sort of all-rounder. They look like they've got heaps of stories in them and heaps of character. Mm-hmm. I wanted something that would kind of go off-road, but be kind of a bit more like a panel van sort of vibe. As sort of playing music and touring Australia, you need to be able to sort of carry all your own gear and have a PA system and whatnot. Yeah. But at the same time, something to sleep in and eat out of, and hopefully sort of get off the bitumen and do a few adventures along the way.
Yeah, have a bit of fun, yeah. And did it tick all those boxes?
Yeah, for sure. It's been a long-standing relationship with that car for probably 10 years now. I think I've had it. I've rebuilt it about 4 times, I reckon, in that 10 years.
Right.
so
it was your old man right then?
Yeah, he was pretty right, to be honest. And yeah, like I probably ran it for a good 5 years, and it started rusting out, and I bought another one just because it was in pretty good condition, and I was gonna sort of retire the yellow one and drive this other one, but I ended up cutting out all the rust and restoring this thing. And then probably about a year ago, I was going through an intersection, and somebody took a turn in front of me at 80 k's, and the poor cruiser just ran straight into this person, and fortunately everyone was all right, but the Land Cruiser was pretty much like bent in half. The whole front end was sort of pushed off to the left, and so the chassis was
a hell of a hit.
Yeah, it was pretty decent hit. As I said, like my brother was in the car, and his knees kind of went in through the dash and put these 2 massive dents in the metal dash, so he didn't feel real good.
Right.
His knees for a few weeks, and but yeah, no, I was okay. Got out, shook it off, made sure my bro was all right, and then we sort of ran to the other lady in the other car, and she was like, fortunately no one else was in the car, because if they were, they would have been squished. But through insurance, I got the car back and bought another chassis, and then transferred the motor and everything over into a new chassis, and put the body back on, and I was going to buy some new panels for the front end, but ended up started to just slowly straighten everything out with a hammer, and she's all back together now.
But that's sort of the beauty about those old four-wheel drives, is that you can work on the run.
Yeah, that's right. Like, I don't know, I just like the idea of things that have stories and character, and you can fix yourself and they'll last, and
sure.
It's cool.
You said that you didn't tour that much in the Land Cruiser, so what did you do the majority of your touring in?
Well, I started probably, as soon as I finished school, I wanted to hit the road and just get out around Australia and explore and play music. And so I probably could have bought something that was, fuel efficient and really reliable. But
fun.
Me being me, I wanted character, and I ended up with a CF Bedford van.
Okay.
The old kind of 1976 Bedford with a 202 Holden motor in it, and I say my dad and I restored it, but mostly it was probably Dad back then. I probably did a little bit of sanding and here and there in between skateboarding and playing guitar. And so I sort of hit the road in that thing, which was like a 3-speed, and broke down plenty of times, and but it sort of went everywhere. Went up and down the East Coast a lot of times, until eventually, I'm pretty sure, I can't remember what happened, but I'm sure the motor seized up on a hill somewhere sort of north of Newcastle.
Right.
And I've been fortunate that my folks, and they've always sort of helped me out and always been up for a bit of an adventure and a road trip. So I rang the old man, and him and my uncle got a tandem trailer and drove up and picked me up, which was pretty nice of them.
That's good, all the way from Melbourne.
Yeah, that was sort of the end of the Bedford.
Right.
Bought it home and fixed it up a bit. We ended up selling it to someone else who got around in it for a lot of years. And after the Bedford, I think I bought a transporter, a Volkswagen transporter, and that thing was it was great when it ran.
Yeah.
It was on gas, and it'd be really cheap to run, and sort of got me to a few gigs and whatnot. But then it started as this weird problem where it had almost died down, as if it was like an alternator issue, like a power issue, and I kept having to. It was I think it was King's Way where it kept dying, and there was probably about 3 times I rang the towies and got towed home from King's Way.
Yeah, it's probably 3 times is probably enough, huh?
Yeah, and I saw every Volkswagen specialist that was available, and they'd plug it into the computers and check out this and that and whatnot, and I'd replace parts that cost way too much, and then I replaced the whole gas system in it because someone else said, "Oh mate, it's the gas system, it's all done wrong," and whatnot. Okay. And then I think it was kind of dying down again one time on the way home from some shows, and I cracked it and I just punched the top of the dash, and boom, and next thing it all charged up again and was fine. So I was like,
Fonzy touch.
Yeah, I was like, I'm onto something here.
Oh man.
And then the next for the next few times that ever happened, I'd just make a fist and just give it a whack on top of the dash, and it'd charge up again.
Oh my god.
So there was something going on in there. I didn't really explore it too far, but I was pretty ready to get rid of that car by then. So I just left it alone and I traded it in.
Yeah.
Some poor bugger would have got
someone else's problem.
Yeah, some poor bugger would have got a bit of a lemon.
Yeah, I mean, what can you do? So you're a bit like me in that you're still involved in music a little bit, but stopped touring a while ago.
Yep.
What sparked the decision for you to sort of take a step back from touring? Was it something that built over time, or was it something that you just went, no, I've had enough?
Well, I don't think it really... maybe in hindsight it did build up over time, but for me it was just like a snap bang moment. I guess my health, my physical health, my mental health just kind of felt like they deteriorated. Yeah. And that was probably another car story, actually, come to think of it.
Oh, well, we love car stories here.
Yeah. But that's kind of I guess really I had a bit of a mental breakdown, and I just sort of the stress of trying to manage it all and write songs, and I don't know what it was, and a lot of other factors that sort of trying to deal with in life all sort of took its toll, and I think I realised then and there that I needed to sort of step away from what I was doing and how I was behaving and living and whatnot, and just sort of see what happens.
Do you think if it happened in another stage of your life that it would have been different, or is it the sort of thing where it just doesn't matter how ready you are for it?
Yeah, well, initially when I sort of moved away from gigging, I was pretty heartbroken. I guess my sort of identity was playing music and playing guitar and touring and all that sort of thing, and I guess just sort of dealing with some mental health stuff and feeling pretty broken physically. I sort of just had to move away from it, and it tore me apart for a while. And it wasn't something I initially wanted, but after sort of, just some time away from it and gaining, I guess, clarity on where I was and what I'd been doing with my life, and just slowly realised that there were other things,
Yeah.
There's more to life than being that Rob that plays music and travels and whatnot.
Yeah.
It's not the be all and end all of who I am, and
I can definitely identify with that.
yeah. So I'm not really sure if it would be approached differently in a different time. But yeah, it's been a good thing in the long run. And yeah, I still play. I'll always play guitar and sing just for the love of it. But I sort of don't really feel the need to tour or play gigs anymore.
Okay, so you don't miss it?
Sometimes I miss parts of it, but there's sort of a lot of it I don't miss.
What do you miss?
What do I miss? I guess probably jamming with people. And just some of those times when you're on stage and there's just sort of certain moments where you feel like your music's really connecting with an audience, or I guess the whole audience is just connected, and I guess you just kind of have those moments that feel really nice. And yeah, I mean, I felt really trapped within it. Sort of a lot of the idle time, and I guess a lot of the travelling and times in bars where it was sort of like, oh, well, there's not enough time to go and do this or that or whatever. What am I going to do? And I guess I fell a lot into just drinking and sort of partying to entertain myself.
Sure, yeah. Is that the way you saw the touring life when you got into it?
No, probably not. It was definitely more about the music when I got into it. I actually didn't really drink or any of that stuff when I first got into it.
Okay.
But yeah, slowly over the years, things just sort of progressed. And
I guess because it's so present that it just kind of it becomes part of your reality.
yeah, true. I guess sort of like different sort of friend groups I was hanging out with. And then I guess you sort of start doing a little bit of something each day, and it just becomes, more than normal. And then it sort of got to a point when I was sort of touring. I was doing like a European tour. I'd go to Europe and tour in the summer there, and then come back to Oz and do the summer here. And between that, I did a bicycle trip across Australia, and I was just doing shitloads. And before I knew it, I just found it just seemed like I was just partying constantly and so fatigued. And I guess to deal with the fatigue and having to play the next night and travel the next day and whatnot, it was kind of like, well, how am I going to get through this? So it just felt like, oh, well, I'll just get drunk and that'll give me some sort of a kick to help me get through it.
I think that sort of turns into a routine then.
Yeah, definitely. It felt like a bit of a trap that I couldn't escape. Yeah. And so maybe when it all sort of came tumbling down, that's sort of what was the realization of it all. Maybe my body's way of giving me a bit of a wake up.
Well, I mean, at least you listen to it, because not everyone does listen to that.
Yeah.
And just drive themselves into the ground. And
yeah, for sure.
You mentioned touring Europe.
Yeah. There's a French fella who he spent some time living in Fremantle, and he was actually a housemate with the drummer from a band called the Waifs.
Okay. Heard of them.
Yeah. So this French bloke, I think he just became interested in Australian music and sort of started searching around, seeing what Australia had to offer in the music scene. And
cool.
When he went back to France, he started doing organising a few gigs for Australian musos, just because he kind of missed listening to that, and really loved what we had on offer. And yeah, he sent an email to this manager that I had, and I think I was about 20, 21 years old, and the guy I was working with was, he was sort of like, I think it'd be a good opportunity, just test out life. And so I ended up cruising over to France initially, and did kind of a 2-week stint just cruising around with this guy Gerard over there, and I had a really great time. And I think the French or the European crowd, what I really enjoyed touring over there, it did feel like they were there more to listen to the music.
Yeah.
More so than being in some of the Australian bars and clubs and whatnot, where it felt like people were there to get drunk and party. And the music was sort of something that was on the side. And
yeah,
it was really cool to go to Europe and go to some of these, even just small little caves and venues and bars and whatnot, and people would actually be listening.
Yeah. A novel thing for an Aussie musician.
Yeah. Especially when you're cruising around Oz, kind of, trying to earn $1 and just doing any gig you can. And
that's it on the pub circuit.
Yeah, on a bit of the pub circuit, and it can be a little bit challenging at times.
And we'll be right back to our chat with Rob Sawyer in a moment. We're going to talk about his On Your Bike tour. But before we get to that, Rob, we know you're not playing much these days, but can we still find your music out there in the big wide world?
Online, there is some stuff available, I think, on iTunes, Spotify. One of my albums is up on there. Otherwise, I think robsawyer.com.au still exists. So they're probably the best places to check out some of my music.
Excellent. Folks, well, you know what to do. Go and check those out. So you mentioned that it's pretty tough touring on the pub circuit in Australia. So you went and decided to make it even tougher for yourself by doing a tour of some pubs on your bicycle.
Yep.
In 2008, you set off on your bike Australian tour, and I found a list of some dates here. February 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th, 21st in Melbourne, Geelong, Warrnambool, Portland, and Adelaide. And the idea is that you're going to cycle between these venues with your guitar on your back and play a gig nearly every night.
Yeah.
How did you come up with that crazy idea?
I was young, mate. Initially came up with it. I think I was driving back from a festival up near Brisbane, Queensland, somewhere. Can't remember where it was. And I had a mate in the car, and just sort of how I was saying earlier, how I got a bit sick of the commuting and the idle time and being in cities all the time and whatnot. And my friend was talking about how he'd gotten into triathlon, and he was quite active. And
is this Harvey Scholes?
Harvey Scholes, yep.
Scholes, sorry.
Harvey Scholes, and so we're cruising back in the car, having a bit of a chat, and I said, well, would you be interested in doing like a bike trip? Initially we were talking around Australia, but it ended up, being Melbourne to Perth, which was pretty cool, but so we literally like stopped the car, we bought a notepad, and we just started making notes on the way home from Brisbane, and just sort of saying, well, I didn't know anything about cycling, or I was not fit at all.
Right.
I'd sort of grown up skateboarding, and that was about it. But
see, it's funny because I had always assumed that you were into cycling. You thought, oh, well, this will be a cool way that I can combine the two things that I love. But it's interesting to know that you weren't into it at all. No,
well, I wasn't into it at all. Growing up, I'd had BMXs and mountain bikes and messed around and whatnot. And but I sort of spent a lot of time, I guess, camping and spending time in the bush, and just that sort of adventure side of me was kind of calling a little bit. And knowing that Harvey sort of had a bit of a head around what the body's capable of, and and cycling and all that sort of thing, it was cool to sort of talk to him and get a sense of, well, how many kilometres a day do you reckon we could do? Which was probably a little bit over ambitious, given that he was like a triathlete and I was pretty unfit, and we ended up averaging about 150 Ks a day, which is pretty gnarly.
Yeah, it's not a small effort, that's for
Nah,
sure.
nah. And like you say, you look at the gig list, and that sort of that first week, I'd probably done like 3 100-kilometer rides in sort of, the training in the couple of months that I'd
Mm,
done leading up to the trip.
mm,
And yeah, to do those gigs and to do all those kilometers like back to back in that
mm.
first week was just killer.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, we played in Richmond, and then the next day we got up and we rode to Geelong, played a gig there, and then after the gig in Geelong we had to ride about 40 k's. Stayed, so I think it was near Dean's Marsh where we stayed the night.
Okay, yeah.
Wake up in the morning and then keep riding. I think to get to, was it Warrnambool was the
Warrnambool,
next
yeah.
gig. Played in Warrnambool. Next day played in Portland, and then after that sort of started the ride to Adelaide.
Yeah.
And by the time we got to Adelaide, I was just knackered. I don't.
Yeah, because there's what, 5 days between Portland
Yeah, it
and
was
Adelaide
about
gigs,
5 days. And so we planned to get to Adelaide and have a rest day, so that we could, I don't know, just chill out, get a massage and whatnot. And we didn't realise that we had to go through the Adelaide Hills to get into Adelaide. You can't just go to like Murray Bridge and then cruise up the freeway. You've got to go the back way and go up through the hills. And so we ended up going through the hills overnight.
Yeah.
And so you kind of dancing on the bike up these hills and working up a sweat. And then we got to the sort of the entrance of Adelaide, and there was all these signs saying no bikes, and we're like, nah, stuff this. Because it's, the massive steep downhills into Adelaide.
Yeah.
And we're like, screw this, I'm done. So we were just sitting on like 70 k's, just flying down the hills through the tunnels into Adelaide, which was pretty fun.
Yeah, it's a good fun way to end 5 days of torture.
Yeah, and then got into Adelaide, and we hadn't booked any accommodation. And
course.
the I don't know if it's the Clipsal 500 or something like that. There's some big car race there, and all the accommodation was booked up. So we ended up sitting at Macca's, and at about 5 o'clock in the morning, this security guard asked some police who were coming through the drive-through. They were like, "Look, these boys, like, they've just cycled here. Is there somewhere they can put up their tents?" And the cops were like, "Yeah, no worries, boys. Just head over the football over there, and you can put your tents up just behind the football club there. You'll be right. Have a bit of a snooze."
Excellent.
So we went over there and put up the tents, and in about half an hour, all these sprinklers come on. And like just wet everything, and we just said, stuff it, zipped up the tent, climbed in, had a bit of a sleep.
Oh, man. At least you had a shower that morning.
Yeah, I didn't know if they anticipated that happening or not. I have a bit of a suspicion they did.
Yes. That's something I would do. So the only poster I could find just had those dates on it, and you kept riding to Perth. That was your intention. It was just short of 5,000 Ks. Did you have other gigs along the way?
Yeah, obviously did Adelaide, and then from there, I think we ended up pushing it back 1 week extra because the amount of kilometres we were doing was just killing us. And so obviously we had to ride across the Nullarbor Plain.
Yeah.
And I got to the town of Iron Knob, which is just after Port Augusta, I think.
Yeah.
And I think it was my left knee kind of went on me, and I said to Harvey, like, dude, I need a day off. My knee, it just didn't want to move, so I was sort of cycling with my right knee, my right leg, and so we got to Iron Knob, and that was a pretty interesting experience. We stayed at this, well, first we were going to stay at this little campground out the front of Iron Knob, and it said that just up the road there was this pub, so we thought we'll go get a couple of beers and relax.
Yeah.
And knocked on this door, and it was just like a ghost town. Like, this town was just fully abandoned. It was some kind of old mining town. But the people there, they ended up letting us stay in their accommodation, which was this old school that was converted into a pub.
Okay.
And yeah, while we were there the next day, we ended up getting really drunk with the people who own this pub, and this old couple came in who were cruising around Oz in their, with their camper van. And I said to this lady how my knee was really sore, and she said, "Oh yeah, what you want to do is use some of this cream that I give the old fella." his back gets really sore when we're driving around the caravan.
Right.
And so I put this cream on my knee, and it went really warm and just felt really good. And I was like, oh, what's this stuff? And she goes, oh, it's like it's for horses. So
Okay.
it was like the horse version of I guess an anti-inflammatory.
Yeah, like a Voltaren gel or
Yeah, like
something.
a Voltaren gel or something. And it felt awesome. And yeah, I don't know whether it helped or not, but at the time it felt really good. But I was like, oh, that's a pisser. And yeah, she said you just go to the some of the
The local vet.
agricultural type pet stores and you can buy this stuff. And
Oh, man.
yeah, it's just like extra strength.
There's a tip for all your listeners out there.
Yeah, yeah.
Get some horse
You can
anti-inflammatories.
start selling it, mate. So yeah, cruised over the Nullarbor and then went south to, is it Albany?
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's
get to
right down the
Norseman at the
bottom.
end of the Nullarbor, and then we rode to the coast in Albany, played a show in Albany, and then I'm pretty sure then rode around the coast, played in Bunbury, and then played in Margaret River, and then ended up finishing up in Fremantle,
Yeah.
doing a couple of shows there, and then ended up flying home from there.
Okay. I remember chatting to other musicians around about the time that you were doing this tour, and the rumor going around was that you were struggling, and that you were sort of on the verge of passing out in the middle of gigs. And is that true? Is that sort of how it went? Did you find that the gigs themselves were less than ideal?
I don't really remember, to be honest. Like, definitely Adelaide, I don't remember at all. I was so tired. So, you could be right. We probably drank a lot of beers as well.
Well, that's the other thing that stood out to me when I was watching your vlog about the thing, is that for all the cycling that you're doing, you're also doing a lot of drinking, which I...
Yeah, we did drink a lot, which is, it's interesting, and, like, looking at how much we drank and how much we, were riding and whatnot. And at the time, like, we knew nothing about nutrition. We were so ill-prepared.
Yeah.
And in some ways, I know it was alcohol, but it actually probably helped in terms of getting calories into our bodies. I don't know. It's probably a really irresponsible way to do it, but yeah, it was a cool experience, and it was pretty funny rocking up to. We'd try and ride 75 k's in the morning, and then pull up somewhere for lunch, and you get chatting to people in some of these bars across, the Nullarbor and stuff, and we were in Lycra, and you turn up on your push bike, and they're like, "What the hell are you boys doing?" And so you end up having beers with the locals, or having a few drinks, and end up pretty drunk, and then after so long, it'd be like, "Oh, we gotta go."
We've got another 75 k's to ride this afternoon.
We gotta keep riding. Yeah, like, we were so unprepared. But I'm proud we got through it. There's no way I could do it now.
Yeah. I mean, doing that in a car is a big ask.
Yeah.
The idea of doing it on a bicycle is...
It's a long way in the car, yeah. And look, people die doing it. There was plenty of stories that we heard along the way of people getting sort of sucked into the draft of trucks and all sorts of things. But yeah, in terms of the gigs and how bad I was, I don't really remember. I remember losing feeling in my fingers. But like both of us, our hands were going really numb, just due to the amount of hours that we were spending on the push bikes. Yeah, but what an experience.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It seems like such a distant memory now.
It was 11 years ago, man.
Yeah, 11 years.
But it's still something that a few of us talk about. And I remember that time that Sawyer rode a bike to all his gigs. Oh, man.
Crazy bastard.
So tell me, from a logistical point of view, how do you go from a Bedford to a bicycle?
So I made sure the gigs had some sort of a PA, obviously. And what I did was I bought this little trailer. It was called a bob trailer.
Okay.
And you hook it on the back of your bike, and it's got a single wheel on the back of it. And on that trailer, I put my guitar in like this real heavy duty, I guess, garbage bag, and I taped it up to keep it waterproof.
Right.
And then I had this big I guess, waterproof bag that we put, clothes and any sorts of spares and food and stuff like that in. And we each had a tent, sleeping bag, and then I had a couple of pannier bags on the bike. And then water. Water was the big thing too. We didn't really plan what we're going to do for water because it was so hot. And by, 11 o'clock in the morning, the water that you had was pretty much boiled.
Yeah.
It was so hot. And there was a couple of times there where we were just so dehydrated and, you literally thought if I don't get a drink soon, I'm going to pass out.
Would you do it again, the bike tour?
Look, I'd love to do it again, but I don't think physically it's a possibility these days. And who knows, you surprise yourself what you're actually capable of, but yeah, I don't think it's on the cards anytime soon, that's for sure, mate.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
It was obviously very difficult. Would you say that it was more difficult physically or mentally? What's the bigger play here?
It was an interesting tour. I guess physically it was tough, but I found I don't know, you just keep turning your legs and eventually you're there, sort of thing. Sort of reach stages, I guess mentally, where you think, I can't do this, but you just, you push on, and then 5 minutes later it's probably the same thing, and you just push on again. And but at the time, I guess emotionally as well, I was going through a breakup with my girlfriend, and there was a funny story around that too, and I actually wrote some songs on the trip. One of them called "Desert and a Bicycle," which is pretty cool. I was talking to a friend about it the other day. So yeah, the girl I was seeing, I spoke to her on the phone when I was on, in the desert, and she told me that she'd hooked up with this French guy, and we were on the way to sort of breaking up anyway. We were going our separate ways, and I was kind of a bit hurt, and she said, yeah, he's actually a backpacker and he's on his way to Western Australia. And I was like, oh yeah, cool, whatever. Not really interested in this dude.
Yeah.
And then me and Harvey were cycling along, middle of nowhere, and this bloody massive truck beeps its horn and pulls over in front of us. And I was like, how nice is this guy? He must be going to get out and, give us a drink or something.
No, it's not Frenchy.
Yeah, and who jumps out of the truck is this bloody, this French backpacker.
He's the last person you want to see at that point.
And he comes up to me and he's like, oh, you are Rob? I stay with your girlfriend. And
no.
I was pretty amazed. And he came up and shook my hand. And if that was his girlfriend in France or something, I might have done the same thing. So no hard feelings. It's all good.
Oh, I guess that is definitely the more positive way of looking at that. Hey, that leads me to the lightning round. The end of every episode of Doris, You Darling Bus, I have a lightning round where I ask my guest 5 would you rather questions. And we're going to do this rapid fire, but you can stop the clock at any point.
Okay, no worries.
Here's the scenario for you. You're on the highway in the middle of nowhere.
Yep.
You're on tour. Would you rather be a driver or a passenger?
Driver.
Would you rather run out of fuel or get 3 flat tyres?
The flat tyres.
Would you rather pay $4 per litre for fuel or have to fill up every 100 kilometres?
I'd pay the money if I had the money. Pay for the fuel.
If you had the money. Would you rather have no windows or no heating and air conditioning?
I'd rather have windows, so no heating or air conditioning.
All right. And finally, would you rather have the stereo stuck on a foreign language community radio station or an early mix of your first album?
I think it'd be my first album, as painful as that might be.
Yeah? Explain your answers.
Well, I guess it's music. It's more enjoyable to listen to some sort of music than a bit of gibberish, I guess, that I don't understand. So
you're a stronger man than I. Rob, it's been an absolute pleasure getting an insight into some of the crazier touring I've ever heard of. So thank you so much for taking the time and chatting with me today on Doris, You Darling Bus.
No worries, mate. Thanks for having me and asking some cool questions and prompting up some cool memories, that's for sure.
It is absolutely my pleasure, as I'm sure it has been a pleasure for everyone listening, and to all of those people, I say thanks for taking a ride on Doris, you darling bus, and we'll see you on the next one. Hey, it's me again. So, we're 3 full episodes into this podcast now, and I'm starting to find a bit of a rhythm, which is cool, but I still need your help. So, there's 3 episodes. Why not find 3 friends and tell them about it? And then if they listen to 3 episodes each, that's like at least 20 downloads, and I'm not very good at maths, that's how I became a musician in the first place. Anyway, look, tell 3 of your friends, and I'll love you forever. Thanks for listening.